More than 2,500 years ago, an entire city trembled in fear before a single beast. Its footsteps shook the ground, its eyes burned with rage. Its massive body had been turned into a weapon. Drunk with alcohol and driven into madness, it was sent charging through the streets with only one purpose: to kill. No one dared to stand before it, yet on that very day, something happened that would be remembered for more than 2 millennia. The beast that terrified an entire kingdom would lay down its fury and bow its head before a man who carried no weapon. Not because it was defeated by force, not because it was subdued by miracles, but because it encountered something greater than fear itself: boundless compassion. This is the story of Nalagiri, the elephant that knelt before the Buddha. Before we begin, there is something important to understand. Many people have heard this story told as a miracle. Some say the Buddha used supernatural powers to tame the elephant. Others imagine a dazzling display of divine power that instantly transformed a violent beast into a gentle one. But the oldest Buddhist records tell a much deeper story. The Buddha did not conquer Nalagiri with power, he conquered hatred with compassion. And perhaps, hidden within this ancient story, is a lesson that remains just as relevant today. For Nalagiri is not merely an elephant from ancient India. In many ways, Nalagiri lives within each of us. To understand how this extraordinary encounter came to be, we must first travel to the ancient kingdom of Magadha. At that time, the Buddha had already become one of the most revered spiritual teachers in India. Kings sought his guidance, thousands gathered to hear his teachings. Men and women from every walk of life found peace in the path he revealed. But where there is admiration, there can also be jealousy. Among those closest to the Buddha was a monk named Devadatta. He was not an ordinary monk. Devadatta possessed remarkable abilities and was known for his dedication to spiritual practice in his earlier years. He was also a relative of the Buddha. Yet slowly, ambition took root within his heart. Instead of seeking liberation from suffering, he desired influence. Instead of cultivating wisdom, he pursued power. Eventually, Devadatta began to believe that he was more worthy of leading the monastic community and the Buddha himself. He openly requested that the Buddha hand over leadership of the Sangha to him. The Buddha refused. From that moment, admiration became resentment, and resentment gradually transformed into hatred. Devadatta's jealousy grew so powerful that he made a terrible decision. He would attempt to kill the Buddha. His first attempt failed. His second attempt also failed. Yet his determination remained unchanged. Then he devised another plan, a plan more terrifying than the previous ones. He would use an elephant. Not an ordinary elephant, but Nalagiri, the most violent elephant in the royal stables of Rājagaha. Nalagiri was feared throughout the kingdom. Massive in size and uncontrollable when enraged, it possessed enough strength to destroy whatever stood before it. Even experienced handlers approached it with caution. Devadatta understood that if there was one creature capable of succeeding where others had failed, it was Nalagiri. He instructed the elephant keepers to give the beast intoxicating drink until it became maddened with fury. Then it would be released onto the very road where the Buddha would walk during his morning alms round. There would be no escape. The narrow streets of the city would become a place of certain death. News quickly spread throughout Rājagaha. People rushed to their homes in terror. Doors were shut. Children were carried away in fear. Those who loved the Buddha desperately pleaded with him not to enter the city that day. Even his disciples were deeply concerned. How could anyone survive an encounter with a maddened elephant charging at full speed? Yet the Buddha remained perfectly calm. He neither changed his plans nor sought protection. He simply continued his morning alms rounds as he always had. To an ordinary person, this might seem impossible to understand. Was he fearless because he possessed supernatural powers? The Buddhist scriptures point to something far more profound. The Buddha was fearless because there was no hatred within him. Fear and hatred often arise together. When we feel threatened, we become defensive. When we become defensive, anger easily follows. But what happens when the mind is completely liberated from both fear and hatred? This is what makes stories like Nalagiri so extraordinary. The Buddha did not merely teach compassion, he became compassion itself. The ancient Pali texts frequently describe the Buddha as abiding in boundless loving-kindness toward all beings, not toward human beings alone. Toward all beings, there were no exceptions. Kings and beggars, friends and enemies, gentle creatures and dangerous ones, the Buddha saw beyond appearances. He saw suffering wherever suffering existed. When others looked upon Nalagiri, they saw a murderous beast. Devadatta saw a weapon. The frightened citizen saw a monster. The Buddha saw something entirely different. He saw a living being trapped by causes and conditions of being overcome by confusion, fear, and suffering. This difference in perception changed everything. The Buddha did not prepare himself to confront an enemy. He prepared himself to embrace another suffering being with compassion. Soon, he entered the city accompanied by many monks. Among them was his beloved attendant, Nanda. By now, the terrible news had spread everywhere. Everyone knew what awaited them further down the road. Then suddenly, a deafening sound echoed through the streets. People began to scream and flee in every direction. Nalagiri had been released. Its massive body thundered through the city like an unstoppable force. Maddened by intoxicants and driven into blind rage, it charged forward, destroying everything before it. Dust rose into the air as the ground trembled beneath its feet, and directly in its path stood the Buddha. Seeing the terrible danger approaching, Nanda immediately stepped forward. Unable to bear the thought of harm coming to the Blessed One, he placed himself before the Buddha and pleaded to take his place. Out of love and devotion, he was willing to sacrifice his own life. The Buddha gently asked him to step aside. Nanda refused. Again, the Buddha requested that he move. Again, Nanda remained unmoved. For a third time, the Buddha instructed him to step aside. Only then did Nanda obey. Imagine the scene. A violent elephant was charging toward them. The entire city had fled in terror. Even the disciples feared for their teacher's life. Yet there stood the Buddha perfectly still, perfectly calm. He did not take a single step backward, and with every passing moment, Nalagiri drew closer. With every thunderous step, Nalagiri drew closer. Its massive body surged forward like a living storm. The streets of Rājagaha trembled beneath its feet. Those watching from a distance could scarcely breathe. Some covered their eyes, unable to witness what they believed would happen next. Before them stood a maddened elephant capable of crushing anything in its path. And before that elephant stood an unarmed monk, clothed only in simple robes. The distance between them grew shorter with every passing moment. There was no fear in the Buddha's heart, no anger, no desire to conquer, only boundless compassion. According to the ancient Buddhist commentaries, at that moment the Buddha abided in immeasurable loving-kindness and directed his compassionate mind toward Nalagiri. This loving-kindness is known in Pali as Mettā. Yet Mettā is far more than kindness as we commonly understand it. It is the sincere wish that all beings may be safe, peaceful, and free from suffering. It knows no boundaries and makes no distinction between friend and enemy. For the Buddha, Nalagiri was not an enemy that needed to be defeated. It was a suffering being that deserved compassion. Many people misunderstand stories like this one because they imagine compassion to be a weakness. We often believe that gentleness cannot withstand violence, or that kindness is powerless in the face of hatred. The Buddha demonstrated something entirely different. True compassion is neither weakness nor passivity. It is among the greatest expressions of inner strength. Only a fearful mind seeks to destroy what it fears. Only an angry mind seeks revenge. But a liberated mind remains unmoved even when standing before death itself. As Nalagiri continued its furious charge, something extraordinary began to happen. For perhaps the first time in its life, the elephant encountered a being who held absolutely no hatred toward it. There was no hostility to provoke its anger, no fear to intensify its aggression, no violence opposing violence, only perfect peace. Imagine the life of Nalagiri before that moment. It had been trained through force, controlled through fear, driven by pain, intoxication, and anger. Throughout its life, whenever it displayed violence, others responded with greater violence. Whenever it became dangerous, people met it with fear. On that day, everything was different. Before Nalagiri stood someone who wished for nothing except its well-being. The ancient texts tell us that as the Buddha radiated loving kindness toward the elephant, its rage gradually subsided. The unstoppable beast slowed its pace. Its fury began to dissolve, its eyes softened. And finally, the elephant stopped. An entire city stood frozen in astonishment. Then something happened that no one could have imagined. Nalagiri lowered itself before the Buddha and bowed its head at his feet. According to the traditional accounts, the great elephant gently took the dust from beneath the Buddha's feet with its trunk and placed it upon its own head as an expression of reverence. Moments earlier, it had been sent to kill. Now it knelt in peace. Hatred had been transformed not by force, but by compassion. This is perhaps why the story of Nalagiri has endured for more than 2,000 years. It is not merely the story of an elephant being tamed. It is the story of violence encountering boundless compassion and discovering that it has nothing left to fight against. The Buddha did not win a battle that day. He revealed a truth. Violence cannot always be conquered by greater violence. Hatred cannot truly be ended by hatred. As the Buddha himself taught elsewhere in the Dhamma, hatred is never appeased by hatred. By non-hatred alone is hatred appeased. This is an eternal law. The lesson of Nalagiri reaches far beyond ancient India. When we hear this story, it is tempting to focus only on the miracle. Yet perhaps we should ask a different question. Who is Nalagiri? Is it merely an elephant that lived long ago? Or is Nalagiri something we encounter every day? Within each of us lives a Nalagiri of our own. Sometimes it appears as anger, sometimes as jealousy, sometimes as fear, resentment, or pride. At times, our minds become intoxicated not with wine, but with our own emotions. We become consumed by hatred, wounded by disappointment, or blinded by our desires. And when this happens, we charge through our lives much like Nalagiri charged through the streets of Rājagaha. We hurt others, we hurt ourselves. And we imagine that peace can only be found by defeating whatever stands before us. The Buddha offers another path. He teaches us that true victory is not found in conquering others, it is found in conquering ourselves. The greatest elephant ever tamed was not Nalagiri, it was the untamed mind itself. This is why enlightened beings throughout the Buddhist tradition are said to abide in boundless loving-kindness. Their compassion is not something they practice occasionally, it is their natural way of being. They do not divide the world into those who deserve compassion and those who do not. Their hearts remain open to all beings. This does not mean that compassion is magical or that dangerous situations should be approached carelessly. The Buddhist teachings do not ask us to abandon wisdom. Rather, they remind us that hatred is not the only force capable of changing the world. Compassion is also a force, a quiet one, yet unimaginably powerful. The story of Nalagiri reminds us that even the most violent heart is not beyond transformation. If an enraged elephant could lay down its fury before boundless compassion, then perhaps we, too, can learn to soften our own hearts. Perhaps the Nalagiri within us can also be tamed. More than 2,500 years have passed since that extraordinary day in the streets of Rājagaha. Kings have risen and fallen, empires have disappeared. Entire civilizations have faded into history. Yet this ancient story continues to survive because its message remains timeless. The world has never lacked power. What it has always lacked is compassion. Nalagiri did not bow before supernatural power. It bowed before fearlessness, it bowed before purity, and above all, it bowed before boundless compassion. May we remember that the greatest victory is never over another being. It is over the anger, fear, and hatred within ourselves. And may we all learn, little by little, to tame the Nalagiri within. Thank you for listening. May you be peaceful. May you be free from suffering, and may all beings be happy.